Hey, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today. And thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And up today, the official Uncle Lou week, 4 weeks into books now. Top 10 poll. We do this poll every Monday. This is the only poll that matters right now in college football. Don't pay any attention to the AP or the coaches. They all have agendas. Uncle Lou will give you the real top 10, and we're going to do that right now. All right, here we go. Now, I've crunched, a ridiculous amount of scientific data and done a bunch of analytical type research type stuff here. And what I have here is the official Uncle Lou top 10 list. I'm going to put last week's poll up on the screen like I do every single week so everyone can laugh at me and see how wrong I was. Once again, I make changes to this top 10 poll every single week based on the previous week's performance. So if you win but you look bad, you may move down. I mean, that's just the way it is. There's last week's poll. We'll do this the same way we always do. We'll start at number 10 and we'll run through number 1. But before I start with number 10, let me say this. I've been telling you all along that the first few weeks of the season, I only include undefeated teams in my top 10. I feel like winning games should matter. And in the month of September, if you're winning games, that should be better than losing games. No matter who you lost to or who you beat, winning should be better than losing. I also said last week that I was probably going to start including one-loss teams in my poll this week or very, very soon. So with number 10, let me say this. Here are some undefeated teams that I considered for the number 10 spot, okay? West Virginia, Penn State, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Cal, Central Florida, Duke is still undefeated. And now, there's other undefeated teams, but you know they're in Bama, Clemson, Stanford, Oklahoma, LSU, Notre Dame, Ohio State. Those teams are going to be in the top 10. But as far as what I considered for this 10 spot, it was Oklahoma, Penn State, West Virginia, Kentucky, Cal, Central Florida, and Duke. Then I considered a list of one-loss teams for this 10 spot, okay? The Barn, Washington, Michigan, Wisconsin, Miami, Texas, Oregon, BYU, Mississippi State, Michigan State. Those are one-loss teams that may be top 10 potential. Maybe they're top 10 now. Michigan, of course, lost week 1 to Notre Dame. Turns out Notre Dame might be a pretty good team. Texas crapped a bit again against Maryland. Now they're coming off a couple of big wins against Southern Cal and, TCU? So we'll see. Anyway, coming in this week, number 10 on the poll, I decided to stick with an undefeated team here. West Virginia. They beat Kansas State 35-6 this past week. They play at Texas Tech next week. 35-6 over Kansas State. Pretty impressive. I don't think Kansas State is that good of a team. Also, keep in mind, West Virginia has played one less game than the other teams on this list because they had a game against, was it NC State, right? Yeah, canceled. And that was a game I was really looking forward to. Now, I decided to go with an undefeated team here. Probably next week, maybe. I will have to include some one-loss teams in this top 10. And I'm going to be honest, I do think there are some one-loss teams that are probably better than some of these teams in the top 10 right now. But like I said, we're in the first month of the season. I just feel like rewarding wins right now is more important than rewarding good losses. But make no mistake about it, at some point, probably next week, we will start putting some one-loss teams in this top 10. And that's when the who you lost to conversation can start in terms of this top 10. And just for an example, Washington has a good loss to Auburn. Auburn has a good loss to LSU. Michigan has a good loss to Notre Dame. Wisconsin has a head-scratching loss, really, to BYU. So you sort of get the idea there. So we'll look to start that next week. West Virginia's got a big test this week on the road at Texas Tech. Texas Tech knocked off Oklahoma State last week, right? And Texas Tech is in the top 25 now in most polls. I think they're 24 or 25 in most polls. West Virginia got to go on the road, play there at Texas Tech. Texas Tech has pretty good offense. What surprised me was the way Texas Tech was able to slow down TCU. Or was that Oklahoma State they beat? Yeah, they beat Oklahoma State. I'm sorry. Texas beat TCU. So forget all that. But yeah, Texas Tech beat I'm drawing a blank. Oklahoma State. So really slowed down their offense. Held them to, I think, 17 points. Anyway, so we'll see what happens this week. West Virginia at Texas Tech, but they're number 10. All right, coming in at number 9 here, Penn State, the Nittany Lions. It's starting to look more and more like week 1 for them, that scare they had against App State where it went into overtime, which is really no excuse for that, and I'm not making an excuse, but it's starting to look like that's not the real Penn State team. They have blown out a series of teams since that game. Last week scoring 63 points in a victory over Illinois. They won 63-24. Now this week, Penn State gets Ohio State at home. The game of the week, this is going to be a matchup of 2 top 10 teams, a huge game in the Big Ten. This will go a long way in deciding who gets a leg up early in the season in the Big Ten East, which is still a pretty difficult division. Even though the Big Ten has taken some slack from a lot of people over the last couple of weeks, you're still talking about a division that has Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State in it. A pretty good division there. This game will go a long way and tell us a lot about how that's going to shake out down the road. Definitely the game of the week. We'll have to keep an eye on that one, but the Penn State Nittany Lions come in this week in the UNCLELOU poll at number 9. All right, number 8. Here's a team I had to drop down. Now, I mean, you struggle and get what can only be considered a lucky win against Army. Oklahoma beats Army in overtime, 28-21. Okay, Army had the ball for 45 minutes in this game. Oklahoma's defense could not get off the field on third downs. They had no answer for Army's triple option. To be honest with you, though, it's not a complete shock to me that Oklahoma struggled against Army's offense for a couple of reasons. We know Oklahoma has a hard time tackling, okay? It's not even necessarily that they don't have some good defensive players or athletes or whatever, but for whatever reason, Oklahoma over the last couple of years just has not been a good tackling team. You have to do that against an option team. You have to play sound, fundamental, stay in your gap, play your assignment type football, but you have got to tackle. They didn't do that yet again this past weekend against Army. That doesn't completely surprise me, like I said, because of Oklahoma's problems with tackling, and you don't play these types of teams very often. You just don't. You see this a few times a year where a triple option team will sneak up on one of the big boys because the big boy team just isn't used to going up against that type of offense. There's only a handful of colleges anymore that run that, Georgia Tech, of course, being one, Army being another. That's not a complete shock to me. What is a shock to me is Oklahoma only scoring 28 points. That is a shock to me. And you say, well, Lou, how can they score? They only had the ball for 15 minutes in this game. Army had time of possession 45 minutes. Oklahoma's athletes should be able to score at will against Army's defense. So, I mean, Oklahoma in reality should have came away with points in almost every single drive of that game. There's no reason this game should have been that close. I had to drop Oklahoma down in the poll. Now, in the grand scheme of things, obviously, this game won't mean anything if Oklahoma runs the table. It probably won't mean anything if Oklahoma finishes the regular season with 1 loss and then wins the Big 12 title game. But right now, I think you have to punish somebody like Oklahoma who really struggled against an inferior team because, as you're going to see, as we get higher in this poll, there's some teams that were pretty impressive this weekend that I think deserve to be ahead of Oklahoma based on this last week's performance. Oklahoma, number 8. All right, and coming in at number 7, and this is, I'm not going to lie, this is one I'm really struggling with here. The Trees, Stanford. They beat Oregon on the road, which was so impressive, 38-31. I just don't think Stanford is that good of a team. And if you watch that game, you may agree with me. It looked Oregon was the better team up until the last few minutes of that game, really. I have watched a lot of multiple Stanford games this year, and something just looks off to me about Stanford. Bryce Love really hasn't gotten going, not at least nowhere near to the extent that most people thought he would this year. He definitely doesn't look like the Heisman frontrunner or favorite or even contender, really, that most people thought he would be heading into the season. He's already missed one game with injury. This is something I talked about in the offseason. He has struggled with nagging injuries throughout his career. He was injured almost all of last year, didn't miss a whole lot of time, but played injured a lot. Off to an unhealthy start again here for Bryce Love. Stanford is a team that when you watch them, just nothing really jumps out at you, at least to me. But this was a good win to get on the road at Oregon. This gives them a leg up in the Pac-12 North. Of course, Washington's going to have a lot to say about that too at some point down the road here. But I think you got to reward Stanford for going on the road and getting a top 20 win here. And juxtapose that to what Oklahoma did. That's the reasoning. If Oklahoma and Stanford played, ask yourself who you think would win. I'll let you answer that. But I feel like right now, number 7 is a fair spot for the trees. All right, and here's one that I'm close to completely flip-flopping on this team here. Notre Dame at number 6. Wow, they put a new quarterback in, this Ian Book. The guy lights it up. They beat Wake Forest 56-27. 56 points for Notre Dame's offense. Unreal. Of course, they got Stanford this coming week at home. So another top 10 matchup there. So you have 2 matchups involving top 10 teams this week. You'll have Stanford and Notre Dame both in the top 10, and you'll have Penn State, Ohio State both in the top 10. So 2 really, really huge games this week. But you have to be impressed with what you've seen from Notre Dame, especially after making that move at quarterback to Ian Book. Winbush, for whatever reason, just was never able to get it together this season, especially throwing the ball. He struggled with that last year. The hope, if you were a Notre Dame fan and a Winbush fan, was that he was going to improve on his passing part of the game heading into this season. Didn't really look like that had happened. And on top of that, he never really got it going running the ball either like he did last year. I think this was a good move for Notre Dame. Obviously, hindsight being 2020, it looks like a great move. The offense clicked. I know it was Wake Forest, but still, you got to give Notre Dame credit for scoring 56 in this game and just dominating ACC opponent here, Wake Forest. You look at Notre Dame's schedule, and you guys know I'm no Notre Dame fan. One of the hardest games on their schedule, when you looked at it a couple of weeks ago, looked like on the road at Virginia Tech. How hard that game look now? Anyway, Notre Dame comes in at number 6. All right, top 5 time. Corn Dogs, you're sitting at number 5. I thought long and hard about this one. I almost put Notre Dame ahead of you, and they probably deserve to be ahead of you, but I had Notre Dame so low in my poll last week, I couldn't justify moving them up that high, so I got you sitting at number 5. But look here, 38-21 over Louisiana Tech. That's not cutting it. This game was 24-21 late into the second half. You go up, weren't you up 24-0 in this game? You rolled over, you let them come back on you, make this an interesting game in the second half. Makes no sense to me. You should have been able to dominate them. I don't want to hear anything about it being an in-state rival. That's ridiculous. You should have dominated them much better than you did. You didn't. Still, I'm rewarding you for a good win at Auburn the week before and not punishing you so much for this struggle bus victory against Louisiana Tech. You're currently ranked 5th in the UNCLELOU poll. You've got some difficult games coming up, though. You got Bama. You got Mississippi State, you got Texas A&M, and you got Georgia. Good luck. You got Ole Miss this week. I still think Ole Miss is a dangerous team who's going to beat somebody they shouldn't beat. Don't let it be you. If you lose to Ole Miss, not good. All right, Ohio State at number 4. Urban Meyer comes back this past week. Dwayne Haskins has another huge game against another nobody team. 4 weeks into the season, Ohio State's yet to play anybody with a pulse. Don't tell me about TCU whenever they turn around and lose to Texas. I don't want to hear it. You beat Tulane 49-6. We'll find out more about you this week when you go on the road at Penn State. I will say, Ohio State's offense looks legit, right? Dwayne Haskins is lighting it up. The running back situation, there's no issues there with the Dobbins guy. I still think you have some issues on your defense that you need to tighten up. We'll see how that works out going forward. Like I said, find a lot out about that this weekend on the road at Penn State. Huge game. You can't overhype this game too much. This is a huge, huge game. Most people thought heading into the season that the Big Ten East was the best division in football. Looks like it might belong to the SEC West now. But still, like I mentioned before, the Big Ten East is a great division. These are two rivals within the Big Ten East, and this game is going to go a long way into deciding who ends up in that Big Ten title game at the end of the year. Road game for Ohio State, whiteout at Penn State. This will be a good one. I'll definitely be watching. But yeah, the Buckeyes number 4 this week in the UNCLELOU poll, though. All right, and third, UGA. I had to drop them from number 2 where they sat last week. I just wasn't that impressed with Georgia's performance against Missouri, particularly in the first half. Yes, now we had a lead at going into halftime, 20-7, I believe it was at halftime. But if you watch that game, you know that was a little bit of smoke and mirrors, okay? We only managed 6 points on offense in the first half of that game against Missouri, 2 field goals. The 2 touchdowns we scored, 1 on defense, 1 on special teams. You take that defense and special teams, you take those 2 touchdowns away, Georgia is trailing at halftime to Missouri 7-6. No passing game in the first half. We played 2 SEC games, both on the road, and Jake Fromm has not looked good in the first half of either one. He's made up for it in the second half, but we got to get that corrected. You can't wait till the second half to flip the light switch on when you get into some of these better teams that we'll be playing down the road. Now, the outcome of this game was never really in question. 43-29. It's a 2-touchdown road win in the SEC. So, you know, on Saturdays and to a little bit of an extent on Sundays, you know, it's overreaction time, and, you know, I get nuts and the sky is falling and everything's terrible and blah, blah, blah. By today, I've calmed down a little. Bottom line is UGA is 2-0 in the SEC with 2 crucial road wins. If you're a fan of an SEC team, you know how hard it can be to win on the road in the SEC. We've won our 2 road games so far in the SEC. This one by 14, beat Carolina by 30-something or whatever. So 50 points, 45, 50 points. We've won our 2 SEC road games. So, you know, it could be a lot worse, let's be real. But I just, because I talk all the time about moving teams up and down based on the current week's performance, I thought it wouldn't have been fair, I didn't think, to leave Georgia at 2. So I moved them down to number 3. We get Tennessee at home this week. Basically an extra bye week. Tennessee just looks really, really bad. They got a lot of issues. Players quitting in the middle of the game. Jeremy Pruitt kicking stuff on the sidelines. It's just a mess there right now. And I have plenty more to say about that game, of course, on Friday. But, yeah, Georgia sitting at number 3 this week in the UNCLELOU poll, though. All right, at number 2, Clemson. So flip-flopped them, basically, I guess, from last week. But I did move the Taters up. A dominating win over Georgia Tech on the road in Atlanta, 49-21. Trevor Lawrence had another really good game and looked really, really good. I still think at some point this is just going to be Trevor Lawrence's team. That's just how I feel. We'll see what ends up happening between him and Kelly Bryant and how Dabo continues to handle that situation. I just feel like this is going to be Trevor Lawrence's team at some point here really, really soon. Georgia Tech did score 21. Again, when you play these triple option teams, I'm never really that surprised if a team scores a couple of 3 touchdowns or whatever on quote-unquote good defense, because you just don't prepare for that week in and week out like you do normal, regular, modern-day offenses. So not punishing Georgia Tech at all for giving up, or Clemson at all for giving up 21 to Clemson. You did what you needed to do offensively. Oklahoma, you need to look at this Clemson-Georgia Tech game, and that will answer any questions you have about why you got dropped down to number 8. Clemson did what they needed to do against a triple option nobody. You escaped a miracle against a triple option nobody. That's why. So the Taters, they take on Syracuse this week. Yeah, last year they lost to this fruit. I don't expect that to happen this week. I'll talk about that game, I'm sure, on Wednesday when I do the top 25 preview. But you get them at home this year, which is good. 49-21. Number 2 this week. I don't know. I mean, it seems right to me. And of course, sitting at number 1 again this week is the Gumps. They dominated Texas A&M 45-23. Texas, couple of things. If you're, you know, and I don't know if Alabama fans, I haven't talked to a whole lot of them over the last couple of weeks, so I don't know if this is something they're talking about or concerned about or whatever. But if you're looking for chinks in the armor or whatever, there ain't that many when looking at Bama. But running the ball, Alabama does not seem to be able to run the ball at will like they have been able to do over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I don't really know why that is. They've got great running backs. I'm sure their offensive line is not the issue. I don't really know what that is, other than the fact that they have obviously decided to become, if not a passing team, definitely more of a passing team. Alabama is, I think, 5th, 6th, or 7th, somewhere in that range, in rushing in the SEC, and they're 3rd in the SEC in passing behind only Ole Miss and Missouri, the 2 pure passing teams in the SEC. So they've definitely made a decision, and who could blame them with the way Tua is playing to put the ball in the air more. Maybe that's why the rushing numbers aren't there. And defensively, they've looked pretty good. I mean, Texas A&M is a good offensive team. Are they a great offensive team? Probably not, but they're a good offensive team. You give up 23, you double them up, score 45. Again, a game that was never close, never in question. You won this, what is this, 33-43. You won by 22 points over Texas A&M at home. I would say that's probably beating Texas A&M at home by 3 touchdowns is about the same as Georgia beating Missouri on the road by only 2 touchdowns. I would say those 2 things are pretty close. We'll find out which team is better between Texas A&M and Mizzou. I believe they play each other this year, so we'll find out which one is better. But I think those are 2 similar teams, Texas A&M and Missouri. So Georgia and Bama both handled their business. I took points from UGA because the first half was just awful offensively. But anyway, there it is. That's the top 10 poll. Tell me where I'm wrong. I'm sure there's lots of spots and places where you guys disagree, but that's honestly how I feel the top 10 should have looked this week. There will be some major shakeups in the top 10 next week. There's no way around it. You've got 2 matchups between teams, both located within the UNCLELOU top 10. Ohio State at Penn State and Stanford at Notre Dame. So 2 of these top 10 teams are going to lose next week, which will make it almost impossible, I think, for me to continue to put only undefeated teams in the top 10. So if you're an Auburn fan, a Michigan fan, a Miami fan, Texas fan, Wisconsin, Washington, Texas, BYU, Michigan State, Mississippi State, Oregon, whatever, any of those one-loss teams, tune in next week. There is a very strong possibility that there will be multiple one-loss teams within the UNCLELOU top 10 next week. Anyway, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and sometimes they're even watchable and make a little bit of sense. Thumbs up this video, share it with your friends, and I'll see you guys this afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern for the live call-in show. Have a good morning.